Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we will be talking about the 2024 presidential election in this hypothetical matchup between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. So, the reason I'm doing this is because, well, A, I want to do it, obviously. B, we did a subscriber decided election night, and you guys had a result that I didn't actually necessarily agree with. There were some interesting parts, I guess, but yeah. So, I got a lot of comments there, I hope that you guys know how to read. I mean, the majority of you probably do know how to read because the majority of you probably read the pin comment. But there were some people who were like completely biased prediction. Kamala would not win Michigan. She would not win. Trump would not. Like these comments, and I'm like, I'm not gonna because that was your guys' prediction. I'm not going to defend your guys' prediction. What I am going to do is I'm going to make this prediction get a ton of comments talking about my bias, and then I'm going to defend this prediction. So, without further ado, let's get started and fill out our safe states for Kamala Harris. She probably wouldn't carry Colorado safe. Why did I just fill in Nebraska? Okay, I'm brain dead after. I'm brain dead after a day of distance learning. But yeah, so we'd have that should be. Oh my gosh, I didn't even fill in the Northeast. I'm like completely out of it today. So we should have, yeah, that sounds about right. 180 electoral votes safe for Kamala Harris. Trump, he'd win his normal safe states. He'd probably win Montana and Utah safe. I'll be completely honest here. Kansas, yeah, I don't think Harris would do well enough in the KC suburbs to make it any less than 13% margin of victory for Trump. Harris would do worse with black voters than you'd expect. She'd actually do worse, significantly worse than Biden with black voters. Biden actually, obviously she'd have people like Stacey Abrams trying to organize, like in Georgia, she'd have Stacey Abrams on her side organizing, but still, it wouldn't be enough. South Carolina, she'd lose by a safe margin because she wouldn't do any better in the suburbs. She'd do worse in rural areas, and she'd do worse with the black vote. And Biden lost South Carolina by just under 12%. It was just barely likely. Harris would probably lose it by like 3 or 4% more. So, yeah. Now, moving on to our likely Harris states, the interesting states, starting to get some interesting states. I think New Mexico could be closer than people think with a Trump versus Harris matchup. I think Trump's better with Latinos than people give him credit for. Of course, we talked about his, big, I guess, overperformance to some with Hispanics. Obviously, he did very well for a Republican, but I think that's normal. I mean, his national share of the Hispanic voting increased by 4% relative to 2016. And I think it would be probably a little higher. It would probably be because he got 32% of the Hispanic vote in 2020. Probably get like 34 to 35% with the 2024 matchup with Kamala Harris. But going back to New Mexico, a state that's 47% Hispanic, I think it's even more than that by now. I read that in 2016. So, yeah, but Colorado would probably vote to the left of New Mexico in this scenario because Harris is not. I think she is a bad candidate. She'd do decent in the suburbs, so I think she'd do well enough in the Denver suburbs to have kind of only do a little worse than Biden in the state, but in New Mexico she'd do significantly worse. I mean, this is like a 10-point Biden, 11-point Biden state. She'd probably win it by like 6 or 7. So yeah, Virginia also she'd do. I mean, we know Virginia is a likely D state. If Biden ran for a second term, it'd probably be safe, but with Harris just underperforming Biden in basically every category. Except for potential, maybe like she might do like slightly better with like suburban college educated women, but it's literally like the only demographic I can think of that she'd do better with. So the kind of the 210 firewall for the Democrats, Harris would win that. She probably actually no, I'm not gonna do that. Alaska would be likely for Trump. Texas would probably be actually no, it is likely. It'll be watch should be like a 4.9% margin of victory for Trump. I'm not comfortable enough putting it as likely. I think Harris will do 1 point better with Biden because she'd do about the same in the RGV, but the suburbs are growing, and she'd do well enough in the suburbs. Kind of the same as Biden, maybe a tiny bit worse. But since they're growing, it would kind of offset, and she'd do slightly better. Maybe likely. Maybe Biden lost it by like 5.8. She lose by like 5.3 or something like that. So yeah. And then going back to Alaska, this is a likely Republican state for all eternity. Not for all eternity. For what's going to feel like eternity. Because people have been saying that Alaska's been trending blue, which it is, but I don't necessarily think that it's going to come anywhere close to flipping until like the 2030s. So Harris will lose it by a Biden-esque margin, maybe a little worse for her. Iowa and Ohio, yeah, those are both. These are like 9 to 10 point Trump states. I think. First of all, Iowa or Kamala Harris would get demolished in Iowa. For the record, she is horrible with rural whites. So she do horrible with them. Taking a look at her, I mean, even with her, I guess you can say this is inaccurate, but when you look at her like first election as Attorney General of California in like 2000, what year was that? I'm not sure. It was like either like 2008 or 2010 or something. And her first election as Attorney General of California, she did horrible with the white working class areas of the state, or kind of like the inland part of the state. Because as a California, like I'm going to tell you, like the bellwether counties of California, the number one bellwether to me is the California. It's Butte County. Butte County votes is kind of up here. Butte County votes for the winner of basically every election in the state, or basically every nationwide election. So, in 2016 it was a Trump county. Obama won it twice, and then it flipped back to Biden in 2020. It's a very it's kind of like a white. It obviously has a significant Hispanic population, but it's more of a white working class type county. And I think Harris would get demolished in counties like Butte, for example. She lost it in 2010, or whenever she ran for. She got demolished in Butte when she ran for Attorney General, and that was when people didn't know much about her. And I feel like she's gotten even more unpopular since then. Uh, and then also, I feel like she'd just do poorly enough in the rural part of it, because Butte's not super rural. It's kind of rural, not super rural. But she'd do poorly enough in places like Iowa and Ohio, like in these rural areas, to bring down her numbers. She might be able to flip Delaware County, for example, which is suburban Columbus. Like, she'd just do so bad in the rural areas that it wouldn't matter what else she can do. And she wouldn't do that great, and she wouldn't overperform Biden significantly in any other areas, and he still got demolished in both these states. So, yeah. Main second would be likely. We don't really have to talk about that. It's just like the Republican district. So now we're getting into the competitive states. These are your lean Democratic states. First of all, I think that Minnesota would be lean D. I think Nebraska second district is lean Democratic in this scenario, and New Hampshire as well. So starting with the second district in Nebraska, this is a 7-point Biden district. I think Harris would just do worse, just generally speaking, with black voters in Omaha, for example, and just in the white working class in this district. So that's just to briefly recap, but she'd probably win it by 3 or 4. Minnesota, she'd do about the same in the Minneapolis suburb, but she'd do a lot worse in the Iron Range. She'd do a lot worse in the rural part of the state, and she'd do a little worse, I'd say, in the actual Minneapolis city area. So that is why I think that she would get destroyed in this, that she'd get she'd underperform Biden. She'd still win the state because obviously she'd do well in the Twin Cities, so I think she'd still carry the state, but it'd be like by a Clinton-type margin. Clinton won it by 1.5. Harris would probably win it by 2 or 3. So, yeah. Then New Hampshire, Harris would probably just win this by like 5 points. I just think Trump would do better, because New Hampshire's not really, it's like not really like an urban or rural or suburban state. It kind of mixes all together. Obviously, we can talk in details about each township, but I'm not going to say that Harris is doing significantly worse than Biden in New Hampshire. I just think that she's a worse candidate, and she'd just be able to do a little worse, just generally speaking, especially in the rural north, like in Coos County, or I think they pronounce it Coos. I'm not sure. I know someone commented and corrected me on that, because they called it Coos County, because my sounding it out failed me. But again, I think it's Coos. I'm not sure, but yeah, New Hampshire. Just because Harris is a worse candidate than Biden, she'd probably do a little worse there. Still hold on to it. Now for our lean Trump states, Florida, North Carolina, I don't really have a problem saying they're lean. I think Wisconsin would also be lean. It's not even debatable for me that Wisconsin would go for Trump. He has the white working class support we all know about, and the white working class, no matter what Biden does for them, like it'll depend on Biden, but I still don't think Harris is just such a bad campaigner and such a she has so little appeal to these voters that she'd just get demolished no matter how many jobs Biden brings back. Her best bet would be to campaign with Biden and say, hey, I'm just going to be another 4 or 8 years more Biden. But even so, she's so disliked by these voters that I just do not see her doing. She'd probably lose the white working class by margins we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan in 1984. So, yeah. Florida, Florida's a kind of like a titanium lean Republican state. I think it'll stay that way for like at least the next 15 to 20 years, and that it'll be competitive, but it'll kind of be like your 3 to 4 point GOP state, and it'll continue voting to the right of the country, significantly. Um, so yeah, I think Trump would probably do a maybe he'd probably do about the same in Miami-Dade, maybe a little better. He'd probably do better in the Panhandle because it's more rural, and Harris just has even less rural appeal than Biden. And really, the only place that I see Harris doing better than Biden is maybe in Duval, but that's because it's growing because the minority population is growing, not because she's too much better of a candidate. And North Carolina, just the black vote will be awful for Harris. She'd be lucky to get 75% of the black vote, and I see that realistically. I mean, maybe no. She'd be lucky to get, I'd say, 80% of the black vote. Actually, that was an overstatement because I was thinking of a wrong data point. Maybe Kirsten probably won the black vote like 79-16 or something like that. I don't know who the third party candidates are. I really don't know. But North Carolina, the black vote would be horrible for Harris, and she'd do poorly enough in the suburbs, or she'd do about the same as Biden in the suburbs, maybe a little worse, and just do horrible in the rural areas, which results in Trump doing about 1 to 2% better than he did in 2020 and hold North Carolina for a third time in a row. So those are our lean Trump states. Now for our tilt Harris states, uh, I think Arizona would be tilt Harris. Like I'm going back and forth on Arizona, Michigan 2, and then Georgia. So that's it. And then and you can see right here, Donald Trump does win the election against Kamala Harris by narrowly holding Pennsylvania or winning Pennsylvania. So let's go through this because these are some weird takes. This is a kind of weird map, especially saying red Nevada but blue Arizona. So starting with like just in geographical order, red Nevada. This is controversial. I know this will be the most controversial take of my video. Nevada is in this scenario going to go red. Harris would lose Washoe. She would not do well enough with white voters, especially younger ones like the Bernie Bros. I think Sanders won Washoe County in the 2020 Democratic primary here, or caucus, which is a horrible system, by the way. But really, she'd do significantly worse than Biden with, I guess, your Bernie Bros who are younger. So she'd probably lose Washoe. She'd hold Clark by a similar margin as Biden, maybe a little worse. But Washow's like the bellwether of Nevada. She'd probably lose Nevada by around 1%. It would be a horrible showing for her here. She'd do even worse in your rural part of the state. And Trump would probably run it up like, in terms of the rural part of the state, the most populous Trump county, I think, was Carson City County. But in terms of like the rural part of the state, really, out here, Trump would probably run it up in Elko County. He'd probably do well enough in the Humboldt, Pershing area to even offset even minor losses in Clark. It wouldn't matter anyways because he'd win Washoe. But yeah, narrow win for Trump in Nevada. Even narrower win for Harris in Arizona. She'd probably hold Maricopa as a result of doing well enough with suburbanites, kind of like Biden. And she'd probably hold the majority of the McCain kind of establishment Republicans who are kind of feel alienated by Trump's rhetoric. She'd hold them, and I think that would give her the victory in Arizona. And then in Georgia, going down to Georgia, I don't know. I was really torn on this one. I just think that the black population is growing so much, and the white population is like the whites in Georgia are just not losing people, and suburbs are turning against the Republican Party so much. Like we saw it in the runoff. Purdue and Loeffler got destroyed. So, or Loeffler. Loeffler and Purdue got destroyed. By the way, Kelly Loeffler's going to run for Senate again. That's interesting. She's probably going to get destroyed there if she runs against Warnock. But Loeffler would Harris would probably win Georgia by like 1 to 2%, probably by an Ossoff type margin. Then going up to Pennsylvania, or actually we'll save the tipping point state for last. Michigan, I think Harris would also carry. Because she'd do well enough in the suburbs to offset her losses in the rural areas and do kind of about the same in your Detroit area. She should actually do like a little better in the suburbs of Michigan because they're more Michigan women turn out at a higher rate than the national average, which I'm looking at exit polls earlier today. So I think that Michigan would probably narrowly go for Kamala Harris in this scenario. And lastly, taking a look at Pennsylvania, our tipping point state, the most important state, I think Pennsylvania would go for Trump in this scenario because he would just he'd do so well in rural Pennsylvania. Rural Wisconsin is pretty red. Rural Michigan is not too red. It's red, but it's not too red. Rural Pennsylvania is like ruby red. It's like some of the deepest red that I've ever seen, really. And I'm not saying that it's like make a meme, but it's literally rural Pennsylvania is so red, and the Republicans still like a little room to gain in the surrounding Pittsburgh area. You can get like your Beaver County, Lawrence County, those areas. I think that Harris would do so badly with these white or with these blue collar voters that she'd, even with suburban gains around Philly, she'd still lose the state and do like 2 to 3% worse than Biden at a statewide level. So that's my final Trump versus Harris prediction. I think Trump would narrowly beat Harris. Harris would still win the popular vote, obviously, but wouldn't matter. So again, thank you for watching this video. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed. Tell me what states you disagree with. I'm gonna get comments about Nevada, but that should be it. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.